Hello, my name's host Eric. Welcome to Talking with Famous People. Today we're broadcasting from the studio here on my desktop computer. Yes, that's right. What you see is a little bit of my background picture, plus this window right here. Well, the reason I'm doing this is because I think it might be the easiest way to proceed with all this information I have to convey to you, which is quite a bit of information, and I hope you like it. Let's start with this nice video here. As you see, we have Steve in the mix. Who is Steve, you may wonder? Well, he's our guy, okay? He's our main squeeze. He's thrown into the world here. Well, it looks like it's just me and all this white stuff. What am I going to do? Oh, he does something. So this arrow is right here. He's doing something. Easy. This is easy. I can live. Wait, oh, there's something else. What's this? It's a blue arrow. Something Steve notices. Oh, there's a yellow arrow. It's going that way. This one's going this way. Wait a second. I think, thanks Steve, something's changed around here. The white part's different now. What's going on? Oh, arrows galore. Arrows every which way. What am I going to do? Thinks Steve. Oh, I've just transported instantly from one spot to another. I am shocked and dismayed. Now I exist in two levels on time. There's the past Steve and present Steve, future Steve. Oh my goodness, and the context is varying. And those light green things, those are my memories. And those question marks, those are me being confused. And what happened to that circle guy? He just disappeared. Oh goodness. Host Eric, can you help me? I'm starting to feel overwhelmed by the universe. I have been thrown into it unprepared and have no means of processing all this input at once. What should I do? Well, Steve, you asked the right guy. I'm going to tell you the answer. I'm glad you approached me first. If you'd gone to some, I don't know, ESFJ or something, you would have been in real trouble. Look, Steve, I know right now you're being overwhelmed. You've got the memories of your past thoughts. You've got the memories of your past actions. You've got your projections into the future. You got those little white circle objects that are all around you, physical space objects. And you've got your analysis about what those things are and what they mean, and you relate it to all this other stuff, these memories, these past events. You relate it to the blue arrows and the yellow arrows. Let's imagine that yellow junky looking thing down here is a significant other potentiality. Let's imagine these are potential employers. What's this guy, Blue Steve? What's this blue triangle guy, Steve? I don't know, but he's interesting too, whatever he is. And look, Steve, now you're being pulled in all different directions. And you have to make predictions about all of this? Oh my goodness. Well, it's no wonder you're overwhelmed by the amount of data. It's too much for me, says Steve. No one could possibly process so complex a system. And it's true. It's too complex a system to process. Okay, so now let's look at this one. So here's my solution to the existing inadequacies in the personality type model as I see them. Yes, they make me angry too, Lacey. Okay, so 4-letter personality types, Jungian cognitive functions, and the Quantum-esqu Relational Framework, or QuRf. It's a time-space thing. Hey, stop. Lacey, stop. Have you heard this question before? It's a famous question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Do you know what the answer is? I do. The answer is, we can't know it falls. It's the same thing as asking if a circle has 4 corners, is it a square? But why is it the same? Because all that can be symbolized supervenes upon observation. Supervene upon basically means predicated upon. It's a fancy philosophy word that you use when you want to sound like you really know what you're talking about. The world is defined as agents pin half of all relational elements to achieve distinct identity. The fact is, everything's moving in all the time, but we have to act as though a lot of stuff is in a static state, or else we won't be able to deal with it. We can't deal with things, there are only certain kinds of things we can deal with in motion, so to speak. So when we understand that this is very complicated, which is a simple enough notion, a lot of complicated data coming into play, and we understand that it's critical that an observer be in place in order to know anything. If a tree falls in the forest, well, how do we know it falls? But we're just imagining that it does. Okay. And no one is there to hear it. Well, how did we ascertain that it had fallen? We're just imagining that. Okay, well, see, there's your problem. Because when you say if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, what you're really saying is if a tree is observed to fall in the forest and there's no observer there, that makes no sense. So one way that we help our understanding of the universe, reality, and our place within it is to divide the universe into time and space objects. Time objects, that which can be named and distinguished from that which is not, and which must be sustained through application of energy. Failure to do so will cause the time object to cease to exist. That's right. Yet it's no less real than a rock. Space objects, that which can be named and distinguished from that which is not, and which remains observationally unchanged until and unless force energy is applied to it, that's a space object. Most rocks, I would note, have vastly less impact on people than most songs. A song is an object too. It's an object of time. Time object. So when we look at time objects, basically anything digital. It's also instructions. If I say, go tell Jenny to bring me a sandwich, and you go tell her to bring me a sandwich, then that message that I have conveyed to her via you is a time object. You'll note that January is a time object. But because there's no concrete anything about it, right? Space objects are obvious things you can bump into, so basically. Time objects. Let's look at some of the rules for time objects. Time objects are loops that an agent makes, a loop of himself. A loop is a rendering of an experience into a medium. Until digital media, time objects were imprinted upon space objects. Paper, mostly. Books, magazines. All time objects have duration. Think about it. This YouTube video does, a song does, a conversation does, a message does, a concept does. It takes a certain amount of time to convey it and a certain amount of time to understand it. Even an image has duration. It's just very, very short because the speed of light is very fast. A sculpture is a space object shaped into a time object. An unrecorded conversation is not a time object per se, but each of the participants maintains in his or her head time objects related to the conversation. Only rendered time objects can be activated. How do you render a time object? Well, you make a video like this where you explain what your ideas are in such a way that you can convey the ideas or express the ideas to multiple people without having to say the words multiple times. We know the sculpture exists independently of the marble because if I show you a picture, we will agree on what it is. If I show you a picture of a famous statue like David, the guy with no arms, then we'd both recognize it as what it is. I wouldn't say, oh, that's a piece of rock, you know. So the utility of a given human experience towards the evolution of the species, metacognitively, supervenes upon the activation of time objects generated from that experience by the other. It's a very fancy way of saying when we watch YouTube videos, we are evolving the species. And the reason is because in fact, all species evolution from this point forward is in time. We no longer have any space evolution to do. So, as a consequence, we have to evolve ourselves via understanding, which is the key mechanism of human progress. Let's go down to space objects. They're pretty boring, not a lot to tell you about them. Space objects are stuff you can bump into. Space objects attract one another. They have gravity. All space objects have mass. A sculpture is a space object turned into a time object. Or it has turned into a time object. The space object part has been changed only because of the application of energy towards that end. The change has been willed for the purpose of cloning the self. Space objects require no activation. We know that marble exists independently of the sculpture because the statue can fall on you and kill you. So the space object part of the statue requires no activation. You can bump into it whether you look at it or not. However, the beauty or whatever aspect of it, requires you to look at it and think about it and process it. Alright, so these green boxes down here at the bottom, I like this because it really drives home an important point, that all of time basically before right now has been pre-work. We didn't have a functioning ecosystem set up for time objects and agents, the time half of agency. We spent all this time setting up the space half of agency frameworks and architectures and stuff. It's taken, 12,000 years to do it. And now we're finally there, and we're all pretty goddamn lucky because if you think about it, could have been born any time in human history. We would have had to been in the pre-work stage. I hate pre-work. Pre-work sucks ass. Okay, let's go down to the next slide. Relational mechanics in U. Actually, let's go over to the next page here, the next paper first, and we'll come back to that one. So when we look at the cognitive tags under this model, you'll see here, these are the conventional J-P distinctions here. What is the reality engine of it? Well, expert thinking is responsible for causality. That is to say, predicted outcomes in space. TI, conditionality, predicted outcomes in time. FE, linkage in space. FI, identity, which is the inverse of it. NE, mutation. NI, dichogamy. That's when you have like a bunch of fish and they're all chick fish and none of them can get pregnant, and then one of them just automatically instantly just turns into a dude fish. That's dichogamy. Alright, SE is fusion, SI is sequence. Now, it's important to understand the reality engines are not nearly as meaningful as what it manifests as and what it prioritizes. That's where we get the utility of the whole thing. It's also where we get the testability of it, you might say. If we're going to test this, we need to have something to reference in that regard, And we do here. We've got the functions, essentially. Listen, animals, will you stop with your crying and whining and nonsense? And weeding? Ay. Okay. So, if you were to say, how can we manage an open system comprised of agents and objects and abstraction and animal nature? Agents, objects, abstraction, and animal nature. Which is to say, force vectors, objects, and then the intellectual half of agency and the emotional half of agency. So, when we are dealing with these things, what I determined is that, in fact, you need these functions to make the whole system go. And they have to be in some sort of a balance. So, you'll note here that, go down to the next one. The balance goes like this. Whatever your default approach is, your default complement is going to be it's going to be that thing, that other thing. Okay, this is getting a little complicated. So look, I'm not going to be able to go over all this at great length at this point because this is sort of an introductory video on it. I'm going to be using these slides in other videos to make points and stuff. Okay, if you see this though, you've got a four function stack right here, and like here's me, disrupt, render, get, regulate. Render we could also call assess. It's assess and render. I put render because what really assessment is, TI, it processes data and renders it into something else. Renders it into meaning, more or less, but useful meaning rather than singular meaning, like feeling people do. So I'm leaving it at render, but these things are, this is how the ENTP operates. First I disrupt, then I render, then I get, then I regulate. So basically, first I jump. Uh-oh, how much damage did I do? I start to render meaning from the experience. Then I seek help. Can somebody help me clean up my mess? And lastly, I go, God damn it, nobody's going to help me. I'll clean it up myself. And that's basically my life. Okay, this is an important one right here. This shows you how this thing works. The inverse proportionality of slots 1 and 4. Entropy is represented here by disruption and regulation as the two ends of that spectrum. Equilibrium, if you're an equilibrium person, you're going to regulate first, then disrupt. If you're an entropy person, you're going to disrupt first and regulate fourth. Equilibrium, regulate first, disrupt fourth. And entropy, disrupt first, regulate fourth. If you are representing the vector of force, you're going to push first, and you're going to stay fourth. If you're representing the vector of resistance, you're going to stay first, and you're going to push fourth. Yeah. And if you are representing the vector of linkage, you're going to get first, and you're going to render fourth. And if you are representing the vector of adaptation, you're going to render first, and you're going to get fourth. And if you are representing the vector of immersion, you're going to proceed first and finalize fourth. And if you are representing the vector of emergence, you're going to finalize first and proceed fourth. Why does everybody go like, I don't understand NI, I don't understand NI? It's not possible to understand it. It's an emergent function. You can't reduce it any further. It's irreducible. That's what it means to be emergent, you know? It's irreducible. So you just can't understand it. Just the way that, why is it if you get a certain number of ants and a certain right kind of ants, and you put them all together, they make a big hill with lots of little rooms in it? I don't know. It's an emergent function of being an ant colony. Okay, so that's it for that paper. Let's go to the other paper again. Alright, so look at these relational mechanics. These are the first three kinds of relationships that the two functions can have. Inverse approach operatives, for example, NE and NI. They serve the same purpose, they recognize the same currency, that is to say they get paid off, they express value in the same way, you know. Positive and negative space distinction, that's the distinction there. So, you know, NE sees what's not, NI sees what is. Gives the system redundancy. Both ways to achieve the same thing allow us to have redundancy if one fails. Gives system flexibility. A couple different approaches to getting in the same direction. Has a multiplicative effect in combination. If you put an NI leading person, NI dom and NE dom together, you're going to get a multiplying effect, which is to say it's all good. And if you put them in permutations, that is to say groups of anywhere from 3 to 16, let's say, it's going to have an unpredictable effect depending on the permutation of people. And, of course, NE and NI, or any two inverse approach operatives, are going to be parallel with our inverse. They run parallel. Okay, so, number 2. By what I mean by that, they don't conflict with each other ever, and they don't ever cross each other's paths. But they're not heading in the opposite direction. See what I'm saying? Okay, so 2. Inverse proportionality operatives. This is like NE and SI. That's the 1-4 matchup. So they have the same jurisdiction. So we're covering the same area of thing. And, you know, for NE and SI, it's equilibrium entropy. There's a difference in priority, which is SI prioritizes equilibrium and NE prioritizes entropy. So as a consequence, we have to convert values into recognizable currency. In other words, NE deals with SI by saying, how can you help me be more disruptive? And SI deals with NE by saying, how can you help me be more spontaneous? They have a zero-sum relationship in combinations. If you get an SI dom and an NE dom who are dealing with each other directly, then to the extent that one of those things is prioritized, the other is diminished. It doesn't mean people don't get along well. I have a great SI friend, and he and I get along great. But when we're doing his stuff, we're doing his stuff. And when we're doing my stuff, we're doing my stuff. You know, and they're definitely different things. And we both enjoy, sort of visiting the other person's world for a little while. We know what that world is. We have it within ourselves as well. We have to. In order to be disruptor, you have to know what regulation is. And so, those relationships work fine, but they are zero sum. If we want to prioritize your interest, that means deprioritizing mine and vice versa. That's okay. They have an additive relationship in permutations, because then in groups, things get sectioned off, Okay. Oppositional operatives. Example, T.E. and N.E. They serve opposing purposes. If you are going to work together, they have to convert values into a recognizable currency, which means, all right, I don't like the way you're doing it, T.E., but once you get this thing set up, I guess that is going to enable me to do my disruption better, kind of thing, right? There's a framework distinction, which is they value a different good. And so these two things generate clash with one another, and they have a negating effect in combinations. If you are a lead dominant TI, dominant NE, dominant TE, dominant NE will likely negate each other, which is to say, not zero sum, like one goes up, the other goes down, but they're both attacking, sort of, they're both negating the other person's way. They don't like it in principle. However, they definitely have a balancing effect in permutations. It's good to have both of them in a group. There's not unpredictable, it's predictably good. Alien operatives, for example, NE and FI, they serve unrelated purposes. Their currencies are not convertible. There is a fundamental framework distinction that disallows them from ever arguing any way but past one another. And in combination, they generate confusion. They have an error-making effect in combination. And in permutations, they have a balancing effect. Okay, so those are the four kinds of relationships, relational mechanics that you have between the types of pairs. It's either going to be inverse approach, inverse proportionality, oppositional, or alien. And that's it for now. You're probably saying, well, what about NE and TI? What are those? Well, those would be complementary, or at the very least, not. There's no conflict between them. You know what I'm saying? These ones are like conflicting things. Things that don't work well, or work. They do work. Like inverse approach works great, but they're still. You know what I'm saying? These are distinctions I'm making. So the other thing is not a distinction. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you think that this is a good idea and neato and worth thinking about a little bit. And remember this. You can apply this to lots of things. There are a ton of different people in the world, which are a ton of different opportunities in the world to catch people doing what's nothing more than contradictory premises fallacy. And that's what that is. It's a contradictory premises fallacy. Okay, have a great day, and don't forget to watch all the time, with every second of your life, spend watching Talking with Famous People.